name's Alice Kettle and I'm very delighted that you're going to be working with me on this amazing project. And so I am recording this video because we can't do our workshop together live. So I'm hoping that by seeing me on this short film, I can connect with you and give you a few instructions about how to proceed. So our project is called Stitching Together, and we're going to make this amazing artwork together for Farnham Maltings. This is the name of the project, Stitching Together, and this is the design that I've already conceived and produced, and you're going to be working on that with me. So the way it's going to work is you will receive an instruction pack with lots of instructions, and this has already gone out to schools because we're inviting schools to do drawings that all of you stitchers are going to reproduce onto textiles. So shortly you will receive a pack and it'll look a little bit like this. It will have a number on it, and this is for your group, and it's all in a bag. And this is what it contains: some needles, boxes of threads, and the instruction leaflets, and some drawings which will have been done by the schools. Then it will also have a pack of squares of fabric which correspond to one background section. And the background section is one of these sections, because the whole design has been divided into 7 panels which will hang separately in the Maltings, in the main exhibition space where they have all the theatre events. So it's going to look fantastic, and it's going to be there as a legacy. You will each, with your group, I hope, decorate one of these panels, and they're all numbered, so you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goes across sequentially. So on your pack you have the image so that you can see how it corresponds to the whole piece. And here is number 7. So it's been printed up, and it's about 2 meters, so it's pretty big. So there it is, it goes this way up. So you can see which is the top, because you've got your reference point on your design. So this one, you can see it's got the blue with the white line across, and then the little bits of yellow. So this one is slightly more straightforward than some of the other ones. All of these squares, which I've cut up into approximately 20 centimetre squares, are exactly the same print, but they've been cut up. So you will receive an equivalent in a pile of these, and I suppose, I haven't counted them up, but there must be about, 50, something like that. So all of these squares are for you to distribute to your group. Now you don't need to do all of the squares. It doesn't matter if you do 3. It doesn't matter if you do, if you run out. The whole way that we produce this piece is very much about your capacity and what you want to do. So don't feel under pressure, and don't feel that this is something that it matters that we cover the whole piece, because I'm imagining that, for example, if we have one piece of embroidery here and one piece of embroidery here, that's enough, because we'll still recognise it, and we've got the print on the background. Let's go through what each member has to do. We've invited schools to produce drawings for you. These are slightly bigger actually. We've asked them to do them A4 size, so they should correspond with your piece of fabric. They shouldn't be too much bigger. And the drawings, it's about the local Farnham environment. So some schools are doing flora and fauna, some are doing symbols. So you're going to get a whole variety back, and I will be trying to simplify them and making sure that they're usable for you. So what I've got here are just some examples of some drawings that I had with another project. And this is the kind of drawing that came back. And I'm sort of thinking, the reason I'm showing these to you is you can see how you're going to get different types of drawing coming back. And, you know, something like that is quite easy to produce if we do stitching. And others, like this one, is much more complicated. So what I'm going to do is try and make sure that any drawing you have remains, you know, has the kind of sense of the original, of the young person who drew it, doesn't lose anything, but also it is not too complicated. So you don't. So for example, this one, I suggest we wouldn't do everything, or we might break it up and have a flower, or we might have a bird. Might not worry too much about all the background scribbles. Although I think the hummingbird with the flower, that might need, you know, that'd be lovely to go together, but it's quite complicated, so it could be that you don't want to do all of that. So what I would like you to say to your group is, don't worry about reproducing it absolutely every detail. Just do the bits that you think have a taste of it, and just give a flavour of the original drawing. Now I put this one, you know, that's a really sort of tonal watercolour piece, so that would be quite interesting. Someone might see that as quite a challenge to do. Just doing lots of reproducing a stitching all over in a really soft way. So I'm going to leave it up to you to work out, you know, what your group might like to respond to, but don't see it as a problem, because it doesn't matter. They can just do it in any way they like. But obviously, the more graphic the drawing, the easier it is to do. So let's start with this. I'm going to start with this one because it's quite, or maybe I'll start with this one. It's quite simple. So we need to now transfer the drawing onto the fabric. So you've got in your pack some fabric transfer pencils. You've got some carbon paper where you can just press through on. You put the fabric behind, so it's the blue paper. So you make sure that the blue side is upside down. Unfortunately, I haven't got any because I sent it all out before I made the film. So you've got that. But you put the shiny side down. You put the drawing on top. You trace it off, and then you draw through. Where's my pencil? I'm going to find my pencil. You draw through so that the line will come through onto the fabric. And what I would do, I'd just go over it again, just so that you've got it. There we go. Okay. So obviously you might need to keep doing that process just to reproduce the image, you know, in sections. You might want to build it up. And where you choose to put it, place it on the material, you know, that's up to you. You know, with this drawing where I've got 1, 2, 3 flowers and the bird, I can't fit the sun in, although I'm assuming your drawings are going to be a bit smaller, but I could probably fit most of that in. If there's something you want to reduce in size a little bit, if you're clever with just slightly reproducing it by hand, that's fine. Make sure it just has a flavour of the original drawing. What I'm hoping is that I can connect the pupil, the student, with the stitcher when we realise the piece, and how exciting for them to see the student's piece, you know, make that relationship between stitcher and drawer. So now we're going to go on to the stitching. You don't need to be true to the colours. If you want to be, that's fine, but if you want to use your artistic license, that's absolutely fine as well. I'm going to use a dark thread because I want you to be able to see it. And so you have in your pack some very simple stitches. Now this is a little booklet I produced, which basically had really simple stitches. There's running stitch, back stitch, fly stitch, satin stitch, cross stitch, herringbone stitch, chain stitch and French knot. But you may well have others that you want to use. And it doesn't matter, you can keep it very simple, just do outlines, or you can invent your own stitches if you like. But so these stitches are just simply there to give you a starting point, and anyone who feels unsure. Some may be really proficient and others may want to just keep it quite simple. So, for example, I'm going to start. I've threaded my needle with the thread. Some may want to use a hoop. So there are a few hoops, and I'll show you how you use the hoop. It just keeps the fabric a bit more taut. Or you can just simply use it with, as the fabric is. You don't have to use a hoop. So the way you use it is you put the one with the little the screw on the table. You put the fabric on top, and then you insert the central ring inside and tighten up the screw. There we go. And then keeping it flat on the table and making sure that the central hoop is kind of secure, not going to pop out. You just tighten it a little bit as you go around, because you want it just kind of there to hold the embroidery in place. And I can actually see the drawing through the fabric. Luckily it's quite fine, it's quite thin, so I can see it. That's an advantage. So I'm going to do this little flower. I'm going to put a knot in the end of my thread, and I'm thinking, in looking at the drawing, I'm just going to do a little outline all the way around. I may not do the whole thing, but I'll just make a start. So let's just do running stitch. I can see the line through the fabric if I hold it to the light, so I hope that you can see it too. I'll just keep it very simple. And here we are. Now the running stitch, of course, you can vary the length of the stitch, you can vary the gap, you can, maybe I'll do a finer stitch down this side of the leaf, so that it just kind of just plays with it a little bit. And what I think is going to happen is it's just going to get richer and more exciting, and have everyone's sort of individual handprint. So it has the voices of all of us there. So there, I've just done a little running stitch, and already that looks, it varies around the edge of the line. I think it needs a bit of filling in. So you could change colour, and you could fill it in with a back stitch. Or in between. So I'm going back over that just to fill in the gaps. There we are, to make a line. There we are. I won't finish that because I want to show you another way we could think about doing it. You could do a bit of needle weaving where you go through. So you don't actually go through the fabric, you just go under each of the little threads that are there. So if you did this in another colour, if you varied the colour, that would be, you get all this lovely mixing of thread. There we go. There's another way of doing a back stitch where you just go one stitch at a time and go back on itself. So let's do one of those. So I'm going back. and then coming into the original hole there, going forward, and back. There. French knots. Should we do a French knot? So I'm going, obviously you can continue with that. So if I wanted some French knots, just if I wanted this little yellow section in the centre for French knots, I'd probably change my my thread. So the way I do a French knot, I know everyone has their own way, but you come up from the fabric, you go into the fabric again and out without pulling the needle through. You wind the thread round, 1, 2, I'm going to do it 3 times, but you can do it more. And then keeping your thumb on the needle, which is hard when you've got the hoop, you just pull the thread through so that all of that wound thread sort of goes close to the fabric, and there's a little knot there. And then back in almost in the same place. There we are. So it makes a little spot. So you can imagine if you filled all that central section with yellow dots, that would be lovely. So there's lots of different ways of doing embroidery. So I'm going to show you a few examples. This piece is all done in running stitch. It's a long running stitch and just slipping through the fabric with a tiny little nick. So it gives a continuous line, which is really lovely. This one here, the same outline, a very long running stitch, look there. Again, a tiny little nick into the fabric, and this for very long lines, which is a bit like a satin stitch. Let's have a look, what else have we got? This one, look here, this little tree, lots of little cross stitches all on top of each other. And then this is running stitch, but building up to make the trunk of the tree. So stitching over and over itself and changing the colours. It's a very delicate piece. This little one here, that's again French knots. There we are, French knots. And there, look at the lines of running stitch, changing the colour. Actually, I think it's a space-dyed thread. And then this here is again a running stitch. Actually, no, I think it's a chain stitch. We haven't done chain stitch. I'll show you how to do chain stitch in a minute. That one. Here, this one. Look, that's the back stitch that we just did there. There. So very simple, but very effective. And here, again, the running stitch and a little bit of chain stitch here. And this one, chain stitch around the edge, which gives a slightly thicker line. And here a running stitch. And then the satin stitch, so you can sort of play with the directions. So we'll just do the chain stitch, and then I'll leave it to you. There are many different guides online that you can use. So chain stitch, you come up from the back with your needle. Just gonna it's got caught on the little hook of the. Here we are. And then you make a loop. You make a chain, a link. You go into the fabric with your needle where the thread came out, and come up through. You can choose how far you want to go. But make sure the needle comes through over the loop, so you can pull the thread under the needle just to make sure it stays underneath. There we are. And then pull the needle through, and there you've got your chain. And the next chain you go exactly the same, but you go back into the chain, the next little stitch, thread under the needle and pull it through. And you can see it gives a slightly thicker line. So you've got lots of lots of ways you can work, and I just want you to enjoy it. Obviously when we look at the drawings, here, when I'm looking at this flower, I might want to do a bit of satin stitch, a bit like this one, to fill it in, or I could do a little bit of running stitch like this, which might kind of block in and play with the brown and the orange a little bit. And there is a bit of drawing behind, which has got a bit of grey pencil, so you could do that as well, but I'm going to leave that entirely up to you. So there we are. Let's go on to the next stage. So you will have a little pile of beautifully embroidered squares. And the next stage is to think about how we assemble the background piece. So I'm going to suggest 2 ways of doing this. So here's the background. Now, each of the squares corresponds, because it's the identical print, corresponds with the background. I'm not too worried, because I think it's going to be very difficult to find where the corresponding piece is. But if you want to have a go and find the identical place, then please do that. For example, let me just take... I can see that this is a white line on a blue background, so let's see if we can find it. It's at the bottom. I think it's probably somewhere like that. There. Looks like it's there. But if it does, so you could find the same place where you're going to join it onto, but don't worry too much. If you want to put it somewhere else like that, that's fine. Absolutely fine. So what you'll need to do is iron all the pieces very carefully, iron the background, and then decide where you're going to place it. And then you've got 2 options. Either you can stitch it directly I suggest using your fine thread. So you have smaller needles and fine thread. And again, you could make that a decorative feature. So you could stitch a little running stitch, or you could do cross stitch. Because this fabric is quite tightly woven, it won't fray too much. You might want to just trim the edge so it's neat. That's fine as well. Or the other option is to fold over the edge. So you might want to iron that in place. So it's kind of a good tight edge, and then perhaps just pin it in place. And then I'm very happy for you to stitch that on a sewing machine or hand stitch it, whatever's easiest to do. The most important thing though is to keep this very flat. Make sure you don't cockle up any of the edges, because we need to keep the kind of whole background stable. So, or you could do a variety. You could stitch this as a folded over edge that side and then stitch it up together here. And as you can imagine, it's going to look rich and beautiful once it's got all this embroidery. And if you imagine by putting on some of these other pieces of embroidery, which obviously aren't designed to be part of this, but you can see already it's going to become this rich background of imagery, which is contributed by all of you. This stage we may revisit later, so don't worry too much about this at this point. The most important thing is to kind of get these little patches distributed and start to enjoy stitching them. Any questions? Just get in touch with me. I'd be excited to see how you're getting on, and I want to be here helping. I'll be stitching too, this is my one, and I'll be drawing in a group of people to help me. So enjoy! and let's make this thing together, stitching together. Thank you.